Yo, this is the Scarcity Studios YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. And our sponsors are Alpha Claims and Hire Birmingham, the leading and best accident management company. Get a replacement car anywhere in 1 hour. I really appreciate you joining me today and I hope everyone's okay and having a productive day. We've got breaking news coming from the Harlesden area of northwest London in the Church Road estate, where 4 people have been shot in a quadruple shooting. One of them is a child, a baby, and witnesses claim that the baby was shot in the head. A male was shot up to 6 times in this violent attack that occurred yesterday. We was only in Harlesden the day before in the street news for the street party that had occurred, where hundreds of people turned up with sound equipment and started to party all night and all day. This brought out a big police presence and also police helicopters in the area. It says in the incident that happened yesterday at 9:45 on the evening, the police say the scene was attended by ambulance service that found 1 victim and two victims in a critical condition, and another man and a woman that are in non-life-threatening conditions. There was no arrest at the early stage of the investigation, and urgent inquiries are undergoing to establish the circumstances. There is a cordon in place and a lot of forensics. We've got exclusive footage from the scene. And in this devastating attack, at the moment is still they're not quite sure exactly what happened. It's one of several shootings. This other shooting happened at 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the 2nd of June, the day before. Police were called to, coincidentally, Church Road, but in the Norfolk area of London, to reports of a man with a firearm and sounds of gunshots. Police were appealing for witnesses and anyone with dashcam or CCTV after men described as wearing balaclavas were seen chasing another man believed to be the victim. Shots were fired inside a takeaway restaurant and they fled down the Church Road in the Norfolk area. There is no reports of any injuries and inquiries are ongoing. At this time, there has been no arrests. We've definitely seen London come back to life. The lockdown rules didn't really matter due to all the protests that are going on. And as far as I'm aware, there's a lot of protests going on all across the country today. And in Birmingham, Victoria Square has got a protest for Black Lives Matter later on this evening. So please let me know if you are attending any protests, and if you do, please abide by social distancing and also take PPE as well. Because as we're all going through this lockdown and adjusting to coming out of being in our houses all the time, and also with the fact of what's happening in America with George Floyd's murder and the police that are being charged there, a lot of tension between communities and the police forces. And in Manchester, this story comes from Manchester, where a crowd of up to 100 people started to actually fight with police because of a stop and search that had happened on a vehicle in the Moss Side area. Police were pushed and kicked by a crowd of up to 100 as a man was arrested in South Manchester. A large number of the community appeared as officers struggled to detain the officer, the driver of a car linked to a drug stop. He was earlier seen travelling at a high speed, they said. They was very hostile to the police, and a police officer suffered an injury to his hand and he didn't need hospital treatment. And this is becoming a common sight across the country with the tensions that are rising from what's been going on in America. Yesterday in Hyde Park, thousands of people turned up associated to a movement called Black Lives Matter. Some people dispute now who actually funds Black Lives Matter, and they don't actually like to be referenced by it, but for the media still reference this. I'll be referencing the Telegraph newspaper during my reaction to this, and this initially talks about this 13 people that have been arrested as protests in London turned violent outside Downing Street. Reports on the ground suggested that 1 policeman was punched in the face, while dozens of people wearing face masks started scaling railings in Westminster. The Met confirmed among those detained, 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of assaulting an emergency worker and violent disorder following an incident near Downing Street. Police also said that social media rumours that the cenotaph had been damaged during the protests was incorrect and they were not aware of any damage. So this also shows the misinformation that's been put out there. Why would somebody want to misinform that the cenotaph had been damaged? Maybe to anger them. Several hundred protesters have been marching for the capital. This is actually inaccurate. It's probably 1,000, maybe more at least. And they say that this is in response to the death of a black man in police custody in the United States. That is half correct. It is in response to that, but it's not just that. It's about a systematic racism that has been ongoing for generations throughout mainly the United States, but across the world as well. It's been experienced here, and I've documented it very much over the last 2 years. Demonstrations have been ongoing for 8 days across the United States following the death of George Floyd, as the police murdered, and 4 officers have now been charged in relation to that murder. Mr. Floyd was killed by a white police officer on May the 25th in Minneapolis, sparking days of riots. These scenes have now crossed the Atlantic as British protesters blocked Park Lane Road by Hyde Park, stopping traffic, including at least 10 double-decker buses that were heading south in the city. Many protesters climbed sculptures and phone boxes, while others climbed on top of a calf in Speaker's Corner. The central London demonstration started at 1 p.m, with people heading to the park in crowds and chanting, "No justice, no peace." Demonstrators could be seen handing out masks and gloves to help stop the spread of coronavirus during the protests. The police chiefs have expressed concern that the gatherings could also see an influx in cases of coronavirus. The Star Wars actor John Boyega has made an emotional speech in London's Hyde Park over the death of George Floyd. The film star, 28 years old, told fellow demonstrators that gathered for Black Lives Matter protests that he was speaking to you from his heart. The British actor referenced 2 black Americans who controversially were killed in the United States, as well as the racist murder of Stephen Lawrence in London in 1993. He said, "We are a physical representation of our support for George Floyd. We are a physical representation of our support for Sandra Bland. We are a physical representation for our support of Trayvon Martin. We are a physical representation of our support for Stephen Lawrence." He added, "I'm speaking to you from my heart, and I don't know if I'm going to have a career after this, but F that. Today it's about innocent people who were halfway through their process. We didn't know George Floyd. We don't know what he could have achieved. We don't know what Sandra Bland could have achieved. But today we're going to make sure they won't be an alien thought to our young ones." John addressed masses of people wearing face masks and holding banners in Hyde Park. He said he did not want to work in fear when in the United States, and he addressed the unrest in an Instagram post. Boris Johnson, who said in the comments on Wednesday that George Floyd's death was inexcusable and has faced calls to review sales of riot equipment that the UK supplies to America, which has been used to shoot children in America. The focus of the violence shifted from Downing Street to the neighbouring Foreign and Commonwealth Office this evening. Police had earlier divided the remaining hardcore cells in Whitehall into 2 groups, one opposite Downing Street and the other cordoned by the Foreign Office. However, a number of angry people in the crowd were trying to provoke outbreaks of violence as the evening wore on. Around 70 protesters then charged the Palace of Westminster in Parliament Square, where officers stood guard at the Black Gates. About 15 police reinforcements arrived from Scotland Yard to support the protective ring around the House of Commons. Shortly after 9 p.m, about 8 police vans carrying territorial support group officers screeched into Parliament Square. However, they remained in their vans. Any MPs who have taken part in the protest in London and disobeyed social distancing rules should be disallowed from re-entering the Commons, said a Tory MP today. So this is an ongoing development, and I really want to hear what you guys have to say. What's your thoughts? What have you seen? And please send me your footage so we can make sure that this is historically documented accurately and fairly. I really appreciate you joining me today, and big up to all the subscribers. I'll be back again very soon. Peace.